Has a job ever presented itself that everyone insisted would lead to your ruin? This was precisely the dilemma Sarah Mitchell faced after spotting a newspaper notice that would irrevocably alter her path. It was the year 1887, and the advertisement was deceptively straightforward. Housekeeper sought, offering excellent wages with room and board provided. Yet, a shadow would cross people's faces whenever she spoke the name attached to the ad. Marcus Thorne, the most successful horse racer across 3 counties. And, if the town gossip was to be believed, the most ruthless man west of the Mississippi. Sarah, however, was on the brink of destitution. With winter approaching, her funds depleted, she had no other options. Gathering her one presentable dress, her mother's Bible, and the last fragments of her pride, she made her way to the Thorne Racecourse. What she discovered there defied all expectations, especially her own. This tale is more than a simple Western romance. It is a story of how the very thing that fills us with dread can become our salvation. It's about discovering a sense of belonging in the most unlikely of settings, with the most unexpected of individuals. By this story's conclusion, you will see why Sarah's choice to accept the job everyone cautioned her against was the most fortunate one she ever made. The dust in Millfield, Colorado, was a permanent resident, hanging in the atmosphere like a shroud of unfulfilled dreams, blanketing everything in the grit of a hard existence. The town was perched on the edge of civilization, hemmed in by mountains that rose like divine fence posts hammered into the ground. Most travelers were just passing through, headed for brighter futures. Those who remained harbored secrets they never discussed. Sarah Mitchell stood before the post office, poring over the same newspaper ad for a 3rd time. Her hands shook, not from the chill of the October breeze, but from a deeper tremor, a feeling like her last strand of hope was about to snap. Housekeeper wanted. It read, Thorne Racecourse, good wages, room and board, apply in person. The words were plain, the ink still dark and fresh. But Sarah had been in Millfield long enough to grasp that any matter involving Marcus Thorne was far from simple. She folded the newspaper clipping and slid it into the pocket of her frayed coat, the same one she had worn since her father's passing 6 months prior. It was the coat that had seen her through the funeral, the auction of their modest farm, and the arduous journey west meant to be a new start. Instead, her journey had stalled in this dead-end community, where respectable employment for a woman was rarer than a summer downpour. The bell on the post office door jangled as Mrs. Henderson emerged, her gray hair wound so tightly it seemed painful. She cast a look at Sarah typically reserved for stray animals or damaged goods. You're not truly thinking about that position, are you, dear? Mrs. Henderson's voice was laced with the saccharine pity of one who relished the troubles of others. Sarah squared her shoulders. I might be. Oh, my dear girl, Mrs. Henderson tooted, a sound like a hen shooing away a predator. No one ever stays more than a month at the Thorne Racecourse. That man's ambition is like a brush fire, and his heart is colder than a January frost. He's gone through 3 housekeepers this past year, and each one returned to town looking as though they'd stared the devil in the face. What did they say about him exactly? Sarah inquired, though a part of her dreaded the answer. Mrs. Henderson leaned in, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. They say he built that racecourse on broken promises, that he lost his family in a terrible fire years ago and it twisted him, made him mean. He speaks to no one unless it's to snap an order. Stays locked away in that grand house, drinking himself into oblivion and venting his fury on anyone foolish enough to work for him. A knot formed in Sarah's stomach, but she kept her voice even. They also say his pay is excellent. Money is no substitute for your life, child, or your sanity. Mrs. Henderson retorted, straightening her skirts. Heed my warning. You accept that job and you'll be back in town inside a week, if you manage to get away at all with that ominous prediction. Mrs. Henderson scurried off, abandoning Sarah to the wind and her mounting anxieties. She drew the newspaper from her pocket once more, her eyes fixed on the simple phrases. Good wages, room and board. It might as well have read salvation and hope, for that was what Sarah desperately needed. Salvation from the empty coin purse that taunted her each morning, and hope that she wouldn't suffer the fate of other desperate women in Millfield, taking in laundry for mere cents or worse. She had seen her own mother work herself to an early grave keeping house for others and had vowed never to walk the same road. Yet here she stood, a single step from destitution. The sound of hooves drew her gaze. A rider was approaching on the main street, and Sarah knew instinctively who it was, despite never having seen him before. Marcus Thorne sat his horse as if he ruled the very ground beneath it, his dark coat flowing behind him like a gathering storm. His hat was tipped low, concealing his features, but Sarah could sense his formidable presence from 50 paces. It was an aura that made lesser men give way and women abruptly study the toes of their boots. He pulled his horse to a halt outside the saloon, dismounting with a fluid confidence and securing the reins with practiced ease. Sarah found herself staring, trying to align the man before her with the monster Mrs. Henderson had depicted. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a demeanor forged from years of commanding thoroughbreds and men across great distances. Yet there was something else in his movements, a hint of weariness that went deeper than physical fatigue. As if he could feel her gaze, he turned. For a fleeting instant, their eyes connected across the dusty road. Sarah's breath hitched. His face was severe, as if sculpted from granite and loss, with eyes the color of a winter sky. There was no gentleness there, no warmth. But there was something else, a flicker that almost resembled recognition, though they were strangers. The moment stretched between them, taut as a rope. Then Marcus Thorne turned his back and vanished through the saloon doors, leaving Sarah alone with her pounding heart and the dawning conviction that her life was on the verge of a profound change. That evening, in her cramped room above the general store, Sarah counted her few remaining coins for what felt like the 100th time. 53 cents. Enough for perhaps a week of bread and beans, if she rationed carefully. Not enough to travel to another town. Not enough for a new dress to appear more employable. Not enough for anything that looked like a future. She lit her lone candle and opened her mother's Bible, letting the pages fall where they may. The words blurred before her exhausted eyes until a verse from Proverbs came into focus. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. A sound that was half laugh, half sob escaped her. Her own understanding screamed that accepting a position with Marcus Thorne was a terrible mistake. But her heart, the stubborn thing that had sustained her through her father's death and her mother's long decline, whispered a different truth. It whispered that sometimes the most intimidating path is the only one leading somewhere meaningful. She closed the Bible, her mind made up. The next day, she would ride to the Thorne Racecourse. She would meet Marcus Thorne's gaze and ask for the job, in defiance of every warning, every fear, and the very real chance that she was making the greatest error of her life. Because 53 cents and a prayer were all she had. And sometimes that must be enough to build a future upon. Sometimes you have to pursue the opportunity everyone warns you against, especially when it is the only one that can save you. As Sarah extinguished her candle and settled into her narrow cot, she could not dismiss the image of those winter sky eyes meeting hers across the street. There had been something in them, beyond the harshness and the reputation. Perhaps it was just wishful thinking, or perhaps it was the first inkling that not everything is as it appears. She would know soon enough. Tomorrow, she would ride out to see what was hidden behind the warnings, beyond the fear, and past the reputation of the most successful champion in 3 counties. Tomorrow, she would learn if the very thing everyone warns you against is precisely what you need. The morning arrived, cold and sharp, frost etching patterns like icy admonitions on the window panes. Sarah awoke before sunrise, her stomach churning with a fear that felt like swallowing stones. She dressed meticulously in her only respectable garment, a blue cotton dress that had seen brighter days but still held its form. Her hands trembled as she braided her hair, securing it in a severe style she hoped made her look older, more competent, more hireable. The journey to the Thorne Racecourse was a 2-hour ride through countryside that grew more untamed with each passing mile. Sarah had borrowed a placid old gelding from Mr. Peterson at the livery, vowing to have it back by dusk, employed or not. The horse navigated the rugged trail that snaked through clusters of aspen and pine. The golden leaves rustled in the wind, whispering secrets just beyond her comprehension. As she traveled on, the scenery unfolded into a vista that stole her breath. Rolling pastures swept toward mountains that clawed at the sky. Sleek thoroughbreds grazed in the fields, looking content despite the coming winter. And there, rising from the valley like a bold statement, was the Thorn Racecourse. It was not what Sarah had imagined. The main house was immense, constructed of honey-colored stone and dark wood, with wide porches on 3 sides. It had an air of permanence, as if it had sprouted from the earth itself. Numerous outbuildings, immaculate stables, training rings, and paddocks were arranged with a precision that bespoke prosperity and careful management. This was not the den of a madman. It was the creation of someone who valued building things that endure. Sarah halted her horse at the main gate, her resolve faltering. A wooden sign hung from wrought iron hinges, the letters burned deep into the wood. Thorn Racecourse, established 1878 below, in smaller script, were words that made her heart leap. Welcome to those who come in peace before her nerve could fail her. Sarah nudged the horse onward. Its hoofbeats on the packed earth seemed deafening, announcing her presence to the entire valley. By the time she reached the main house, her palms were slick with nervous sweat. A man emerged from one of the stables as she dismounted. He was older, with a face weathered like old leather, but his eyes were kind, and his gentle manner put Sarah somewhat at ease. He tipped the brim of his hat. "Morning, miss. Can I help you?" "I'm here about the housekeeper position," Sarah stated, relieved that her voice held steady. "Is Mr. Thorn in?" The man's expression softened with what looked like sympathy. "He's up at the house. I'm Tom Brady, the head trainer. Been with Mr. Thorn for 8 years now." He paused, his gaze assessing her. "Are you certain about this, miss? It's not that he's a bad man, just not an easy 1 inch." Sarah pulled her shoulders back. "I'm certain." Tom nodded slowly. "All right then, I'll take you up. But be warned, he's been in a foul mood lately. Lost the last housekeeper a week ago, and it's got him considering living alone for good." They ascended the stone steps to the wide porch. Tom rapped on the heavy door, then stood back. "Mr. Thorn, a lady here about the housekeeper job." The door swung open, and Sarah stood face to face with Marcus Thorn. Up close, he was even more formidable. He was well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders built from years of controlling powerful racehorses. His dark hair had streaks of premature silver, and those winter sky eyes held a depth that hinted at countless storms weathered. But it was his face that startled her. Yes, it was hard, etched by wind and whatever sorrows he bore, but it was not cruel. It was the face of a man who had constructed walls so high he no longer knew where the gates were. "You're here about the job," he stated, his voice a low rumble, roughened by years of shouting commands across thundering tracks. "Yes, sir." Sarah Mitchell, she offered her hand, then instantly felt foolish as he stared at it as if it were a foreign object. After a moment that stretched into an eternity, he gave it a brief, firm shake. His grip was strong, but not crushing, and she saw his hands were scarred from years of hard, honest work. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. The inside of the house was breathtaking. A grand staircase swept up from a 2-story foyer like a piece of sculpture. But it was the silence that was most striking. Not the comfortable quiet of a well-run home, but the vacant silence of a place where joy had long since died. Marcus led her to a sitting room that was as beautiful as it was heartbreaking. Exquisite furniture was arranged with geometric precision, every surface immaculate but cold. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, its hearth swept clean and empty. On the mantelpiece sat a single, silver-framed photograph, turned face down. "Sit," Marcus commanded, indicating a chair upholstered in deep blue velvet. Sarah perched on its edge, her back rigid. Marcus remained standing, his presence consuming the room. The last 3 housekeepers stayed for exactly 2 weeks, 1 month and 4 days. He began without preamble. "They all left, declaring me impossible to work for." What makes you believe you'll be any different? Sarah met his stare directly. Perhaps I won't be, but I need this job, Mr. Thorne. And I am prepared to work harder than anyone you've employed before. Need. He repeated the word as if it left a sour taste. What kind of need propels a woman to seek work with a man the whole town calls a monster? The question was blunt, nearly hostile. But Sarah detected an undercurrent of something else. A test of her fortitude. The kind of need that comes from having 53 cents to my name and nowhere else to go, Sarah answered truthfully. My father passed away 6 months ago. I came west seeking a new life, but new lives require money I do not have. A flicker of something crossed Marcus's eyes. What did you hear about the other housekeepers? Sarah had been dreading this. Mrs. Henderson said they couldn't stand your temperament. Marcus was silent for so long Sarah feared she had already failed. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer. I do not have a temperament, Miss Mitchell. I have standards. I require meals on time, laundry done correctly, and my privacy to be unequivocally respected. The women before you seem to believe their duties included mending my character and improving my disposition. A corner of his mouth twitched in something that was almost a smile. I have no interest in being mended or improved. Sarah nodded. I understand, sir. Do you? He walked to the window, gazing out at his domain. This house has been devoid of a woman's touch for 5 years. I am accustomed to solitude. I eat when I am hungry and speak only when it is essential. I do not require conversation, companionship, or cheerfulness. I require someone to keep my house, not to keep me. There was a deep, carefully guarded pain in his words. Sarah felt an unexpected pang of sympathy for this man who had built a fortress around himself. I'm not looking to mend anyone, Mr. Thorne. I just need honest work. He turned back, his piercing gaze searching her face. The pay is $30 a month, plus room and board. You'll have Sundays and 1 evening a week to yourself. Your rooms are in the East Wing, separate from the main house. I expect breakfast at 6, the midday meal at noon, and supper at 7. The house is to be cleaned top to bottom once weekly, laundry twice, and my study is to remain off-limits under all circumstances. Sarah's heart soared. $30 was more than she had dared to dream of. That sounds fair, sir. I'm not done, he said, his voice hardening. There are no second chances here, Miss Mitchell. If you cannot manage the work or the isolation, if you decide my soul needs saving or I need to smile, if you introduce any drama into my home, you will be gone the same day. Am I making myself clear? Sarah rose, meeting his intimidating gaze with all her courage. Crystal clear, Mr. Thorne. When do you wish for me to start? For the first time, a look of surprise touched his features. You can move in today, if you are prepared. I am prepared. Marcus gave a curt nod. Tom will show you to your quarters and explain the household routines. Welcome to Thorne Racecourse, Miss Mitchell. Try not to make me regret this. As Sarah followed Tom Brady to the East Wing, she felt she had entered into something far more complex than a job. Marcus Thorne was not the monster from the stories, but he was something more perilous. A man nursing wounds so profound they had reshaped his soul. Yet, as Tom led her to a pleasant room with a view of the endless grasslands, Sarah felt a stirring of something she had not felt in months. Hope, not just for a steady wage, but for the chance that the job everyone warned her about was exactly where she was meant to be. Outside her window, the wind whispered through the grass like a promise. And for the first time since her father died, Sarah Mitchell let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she was becoming a cowgirl who had finally found her way home. The first week at the Thorne Racecourse was like a formal dance between two strangers learning to navigate each other's space. Sarah rose before the sun each day, her body adjusting to the crisp mountain air and the considerable responsibility of managing such a large estate. The kitchen became her refuge, a place to immerse herself in the familiar rituals of cooking while the world outside was still asleep. Marcus honored his promise of solitude. He would appear for meals with the precision of a clock, eat in silence, and vanish back into his work. Sarah quickly memorized his preferences. Coffee as black as night, no sugar, Eggs over easy. Bacon crisp. He would read the newspaper at breakfast, his gaze sweeping over headlines from a world that felt a universe away from their quiet valley. She started to see why the previous housekeepers had run. It wasn't overt cruelty that drove them off, but the oppressive weight of the silence. The house felt like an exquisite mausoleum, perfectly preserved but utterly devoid of life. But Sarah had grown up in quiet homes. Her mother's illness had taught her to move softly and exist without demanding notice. Where others found the stillness stifling, Sarah found it calming. On her fourth day, she made a discovery that changed her perspective. While dusting the sitting room, her cloth snagged the corner of the face-down photograph on the mantel. It flipped over, revealing a family portrait that made her heart ache with sudden insight. A younger Marcus stood behind a lovely woman with laughing eyes, and between them, a little girl of about 5 beamed at the camera, her grin missing 2 front teeth. The woman's hand rested on her pregnant belly. They looked like a moment of pure happiness captured on film. Sarah gazed at the photo, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The cold fireplace, the pristine and used rooms, the way Marcus moved through his own house like a ghost. This was not the home of a cruel man, but the shrine of a broken one. With reverence, she carefully turned the photo face down again. But something inside her had softened toward the man who took his meals alone and kept his grief locked away. That afternoon, with Marcus out checking on his horses, Sarah made a decision. She ventured toward the forbidden territory of his study. The door groaned open to reveal a room that felt like the man's very soul. Books lined every wall, and a massive desk was covered in ledgers and papers. But it was the scent that struck her: leather, ink, and the smell of quiet contemplation. She hadn't come to pry, but she couldn't bear the thought of this room, so clearly his sanctuary, gathering dust. She worked quickly, dusting shelves and sweeping the floor. Finding a cup with old coffee grounds, she washed it and returned it to its place. She was just finishing when she heard his boots on the porch. Her heart pounded as she slipped out a back door just as he entered the front hall. That evening at supper, Marcus watched her with his penetrating eyes. "The study smells of lemon oil," he said finally. Sarah's heart stopped. "Yes, sir. I specifically said it was off limits." "You did, sir." He cut a piece of cornbread. "Why?" She considered lying but sensed he would see through it. "Because a room full of books shouldn't smell of neglect," she said quietly. "Even forbidden spaces deserve respect." The silence stretched. Sarah braced for dismissal. Instead, Marcus took a bite of his stew. "Do not touch the desk." "No, sir. And do not rearrange anything." "I wouldn't dream of it, sir." That was all. A quiet acceptance that surprised them both. As days turned into a week, Sarah noticed small shifts. Marcus started to linger over his coffee, not reading, but looking out the window. The true breakthrough came in her second week when autumn showed its teeth. Snow fell in thick, wet flakes, and the wind howled. She built up the fires and prepared breakfast, but when 6 o'clock passed without Marcus, she felt a genuine pang of worry. He was never late. She went to his bedroom and knocked. "Mr. Thorne?" "Breakfast is ready." Silence. She knocked again, louder, and heard a groan from inside. Pressing her ear to the door, her concern deepened. Taking a deep breath, she turned the handle and stepped in. Marcus lay in bed, flushed with fever, his hair damp with sweat. "You shouldn't be in here," he rasped. "When did this start?" she asked, ignoring his protest and crossing to his bed. "Last night. Just a cold, a fit of coughing seized him, leaving him breathless." She placed her hand on his forehead. He was burning with fever. "This isn't a cold, Mr. Thorne. It's influenza." "I'll be fine," he insisted, but his attempt to push her away was feeble. "You'll be dead if you don't get some care," Sarah said bluntly. "Now stop being stubborn and let me help." Their eyes locked in a battle of wills. But Sarah, having nursed her parents through their final days, recognized how sick he was. "I don't need help," he said, but the words lacked force. "Everyone needs help sometimes." she replied gently. Even stubborn champions who think they're made of iron. Something in her voice broke through his defenses. He closed his eyes and sank back into the pillows, surrendering. For 3 long days, Sarah cared for him. His fever climbed, and in his delirium, he called out for his wife, Emma, and his daughter, Lily. His voice breaking with a pain that had nothing to do with illness. Sarah sat by his bed, bathing his brow and forcing broth down his throat, her heart breaking for the man who carried such immense grief. On the 3rd night, the fever finally broke. Sarah awoke from a doze to find Marcus watching her, his eyes clear for the first time. "You stayed," he whispered. "Where else would I go?" she asked. "The others would have left." Sarah managed a small smile. "I've had influenza. Besides, someone had to make sure you didn't die of stubbornness." He almost smiled back. "Thank you." "No need," she said. "It's what anyone would have done." "No," he said quietly. "It's what you did. There's a difference." As Marcus recovered, the distance between them crumbled. He began asking about her day. Drawn into conversation, she found herself lingering after meals. She learned he'd built the racecourse from nothing, driven by a vision he'd shared with Emma, a schoolteacher he'd met in Denver. Lily had been born in the grand house. The fire had claimed them both 5 years ago on a cold February night. He'd rebuilt the house, but not his life. He also noticed her fascination with the horses. He started letting her spend her free time at the stables with Tom. She showed a natural ability to soothe the high-strung thoroughbreds, a quiet gift that Tom encouraged. She was becoming more than a housekeeper. She was becoming a cowgirl, finding a new purpose in this unexpected world. The first true test of their new, fragile bond arrived with the deep chill of December. Snow piled high against the windows, and the wind moaned through the eaves. One morning, as Sarah was rolling out biscuit dough, she heard a sound that did not belong, weeping, coming from a part of the house she had never explored. She followed the desperate sound to a small room painted in soft yellow. A child's room, Lily's room. Marcus sat on the floor beside a small bed, his shoulders shaking with grief as he clutched a small, handmade toy horse. "Today would have been her 10th birthday, he said, his voice raw and broken. "Emma always made such a fuss. Cake for breakfast, presents all day." He clutched the toy tighter. "I try to forget, but some dates are burned into your bones." Sarah knelt on the floor beside him. "Tell me about her." He looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time. "I kept everything the same. Her clothes, her books. Tom thinks I'm losing my mind." "Grief doesn't follow a timeline," Sarah said gently. "And love doesn't just disappear." A shadow of a smile touched his lips. Stubborn as a mule and twice as smart. She could ride before she could properly walk. He looked at the toy horse. "She named this one Gallant," said he had a brave heart. His voice cracked. They were going to have such beautiful lives. He told her about the fire, how it had started in the stables and spread with unnatural speed, how he'd tried to reach them, how his men had to hold him back to keep him from running into the inferno. "They knew you loved them, Marcus," Sarah said firmly, taking his hand. "They knew you would have saved them if you could." "How do you know that?" he asked, his eyes haunted. "Because I know what it's like to lose everyone," she said simply. "Love doesn't end with death. It just changes in that room of memories." They were just 2 people who understood how life could break your heart and still demand you go on living. "Being happy isn't a betrayal," Sarah said softly. "It's what they would have wanted for you." He stood slowly, still holding the toy horse. "Emma would have liked you," he said. "She always said the best people are the ones who show up when everyone else has run away." He looked around the room one last time, then carefully placed the toy horse back on the bed. "I think I'd like some breakfast. Maybe you could tell me about your family." It was a small step, but a profound one. As they walked to the kitchen, the house itself seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Over warmed biscuits and fresh coffee, Sarah shared her own story of loss. "I used to think I was cursed," she admitted. "That maybe I wasn't meant for happiness." "What changed your mind?" Marcus asked. Sarah considered it. Coming here, I think. Taking a job everyone said would destroy me, only to become a cowgirl instead. And finding out the thing that scares you most is sometimes what you need. Even if it means working for the most ruthless champion in 3 counties? Marcus asked, a hint of humor in his voice. Sarah smiled. Especially then, because it turns out he's just the loneliest. And loneliness, I understand. When Marcus excused himself to check on the horses, he paused at the door. Sarah, thank you. For not running. Where would I run to? She asked with a smile. This is home now. The word hung between them, a promise unspoken. As Sarah cleared the table, she found herself humming, a habit she'd lost long ago. The job everyone had warned her about was teaching her that the greatest risk wasn't taking a chance on a dangerous man, but on a broken one. And sometimes, if you are patient and brave enough to stay, broken things can heal. Not back to what they were, but into something new and beautiful in its own way. As the snow blanketed the Thorn Racecourse, Sarah Mitchell knew she had found exactly where she belonged. Not in spite of the warnings, but because of them. The ruthless champion was someone else entirely, and Sarah was learning that the very thing that is supposed to destroy you can sometimes be the thing that saves you, and in saving another helps you find yourself.